The After Cyberspace module introduced 3 frameworks for understanding what has changed in the relationship between the digital and the physical. Jones's eversion, Malaby's hypomediacy, Bogost's proliferation of the game form into everything. This lecture is in 2 parts. The first brings those frameworks to the ground, to the specific game that you're thinking about. The second turns to the final project itself, what it needs to do, how to build an argument from your fieldwork, and where to find the scholarly conversation you are entering. Jones's eversion describes a cultural shift at the scale of the digital as a whole, but it has local expressions in specific games, communities, moments where the boundary between the virtual and the physical has stopped making sense as a boundary. Think about your field site. Where does the in-game bleed outward? This might be economic. Does your game have a real money economy, a grey market, a player-driven exchange that connects to the financial world outside? It might be social. Does your community maintain relationships across platforms? Discord servers, subreddits, Twitter or X accounts, live stream channels, so that the social world of the game exceeds the game itself. It might be spatial. Are there location-based elements, real-world events, conventions, community meetups that bring the game into physical space? Eversion is not just about large-scale transitions like Pokemon Go. It is also visible in the texture of everyday life in the game community, in the way that what happens in the game does not stay there and was probably never expected to. Huizinga's Magic Circle and its critique has been a through line for the whole course. By now you've seen it expressed from multiple directions. It leaks economically through Burke or DeBell. It leaks socially through Consalvo. It was never politically neutral, as expressed by Akil Fletcher or Fickle. And its cultural promise, that there is a bounded digital world to step into, has structurally ended. What does this mean in your specific field site? Some communities police the boundary actively. They have strong norms about what counts as legitimate play, what constitutes cheating, who belongs and who does not. Others have effectively abandoned the premise. The game is one node in a larger social world that includes streaming, fan content, real money transactions, and ongoing relationships that extend far beyond any session. Most fall somewhere in between. Where is your game on this spectrum? And what does the community's relationship to the boundary reveal about who the game is imagined to be for? The assumed player question has evolved over the course. We started with winner's imagined user, moved through the gendered and racialized assumptions of specific gaming communities, and arrived in the After Cyberspace module at a more expansive version. In a gamified world, the assumed player is always the assumed worker, someone whose engagement is the product. What does the assumed player look like in your game, right now, in 2026? Think about design assumptions. What kind of player is the game built for, in terms of time, resources, technical access, and social identity? Think about community norms. Who is welcomed? Who is suspected? Who is tolerated? Or who is excluded? And think about the economic structure of the game. Whose engagement is being monetized, and whose costs, be it in time, labour, or attention, are being externalized? You do not need to answer all of these comprehensively, but you should have a working sense of who the game imagines its player to be, and whether your fieldwork has revealed the gap between the imagined player and the actual community you have been observing. So moving on to the final project. First, your final project will need to do 3 things. First, make an observation. Something specific happened in your field site. Not, I noticed that people care about reputation in this community, but a particular moment whose reputation matters and whose does not, and what happens when it is threatened. The more specific and concrete the observation, the stronger the paper. Abstract claims about virtual worlds in general are the weakest thing you can write. Grounded claims about this community, at this moment, built from what you actually saw, that is the substance of ethnographic argument. Second, connect that observation to a scholarly conversation. The readings from this course have been mapping a set of live debates about where the boundary between virtual and real actually falls, about who the assumed player is in various game contexts, about how governance works when developers have deity-like power over the world's physics. Your fieldwork will have landed somewhere in relation to one or more of these debates. The question is, where? Does what you observed complicate a claim from the literature, confirm it in a different context, or reveal something the existing scholarship does not account for? The way to find your location in the conversation is to read outward from the course. Start with the texts that connect most directly to your observation and follow their citations. Bourdieu leads to a vast literature on capital and social reproduction. Malaby leads to work on ludocapitalism and game labour. Fletcher and Fickle lead to the growing scholarship on race and digital culture. Nardi and Golub lead to the ethnography of virtual worlds tradition. Taylor's assemblage framework leads to science and technology studies and actor network theory. Find the current edge of the conversation in your area, the most recent work, the papers responding to each other right now, and ask where your observation sits in relation to that edge. Third, make an argument. Don't say, I noticed X and here is a reading that discusses X, but I noticed X, which suggests that we think we know about Y needs to be revised in the following way. The argument is the contribution. What does your fieldwork allow you to see that you could not have seen without it? So where to look? A few areas where the live scholarly conversations are active and where the course's threads are still being worked out. The governance of virtual worlds is changing rapidly. Platform companies are deploying algorithmic moderation. Platform companies are deploying algorithmic moderation, AI-generated content, and commercial event structures that transform what virtual worlds are. How do communities in your game negotiate with, resist, or accommodate these changes? What norms do they enforce when official governance fails or does not reach? Identity and difference remain understudied in many contexts. Fletcher and Fickle give us strong accounts of race in specific game contexts. Yee and Drenton give us the foundational gender analysis. But these accounts are concentrated in particular games and particular historical moments. How did the dynamics they describe look in your field site in 2026? What does the assumed player look like here, and who falls outside the category? Then there is the moral economy of play. The norms that govern what counts as fair, legitimate, or exploitative is something every game community develops and enforces. Burke mapped it in early MMOs. Krista Lee Malone showed us how players build their own economic institutions when official systems fail. Your community has its own version. What triggers the community's sense of violation? Who gets to define legitimacy? And what does the moral economy reveal about who this game is designed to be for? And finally, After Cyberspace in practice is a newer and more open area. Jones, Malaby and Bogos give us the conceptual vocabulary, but the ethnographic literature applying eversion and hypomediacy to specific communities is still relatively thin or doesn't exist at all. If your fieldwork has turned up something that speaks directly to how the boundary between in-game and out-of-game operates, or has stopped operating, there is genuine room for original contribution here. But these are just starting points, not boxes. The most interesting papers will find the place where your specific fieldwork intersects the literature in a way that generates genuine surprise, a case where the theory has to stretch to accommodate what you saw. So a note on scale and scope. The blog post format of the final project is not a shortcut. It's a constraint that demands precision. You cannot cover everything. The most common failure mode at this stage is trying to address too much. Multiple questions, multiple theoretical frameworks, multiple moments from the fieldwork. The result is a paper that gestures at everything and establishes nothing. The alternative is to go deep on one thing, one moment, one exchange, one pattern, followed wherever it leads, with full analytic attention. That one thing handled well is worth more than 3 things handled superficially. If you have rich material on a specific moment in your field site, trust it and let it carry the paper. So while this module is asynchronous, office hours are available throughout. If you find yourself stuck on this question, unsure about how to proceed, find sources, or what your argument actually is, come and talk. Send me an email and I'm more than happy to arrange the time to meet face to face. The rest of the instructions for the assignments will be available on the canvas.